Okay, good morning, everyone. Nice to see everyone here. Welcome to everyone online. We are in our fourth day of a 5-day retreat here, and I've been sharing teachings with students to be able to help them understand the path to enlightenment. And last night I shared what's called the fetter of sensual desire and ill will, helping students understand how to eliminate this out of the mind, which helps to produce the peace and the joy that the Buddha taught is the enlightened mental state. And there's these 10 individual pollutions that an individual would be working to eliminate as part of this path to enlightenment. And last night, describing sensual desire and ill will, one of the solutions to eliminate ill will is loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness. So this morning, the plan is to teach loving kindness meditation and then do loving kindness meditation with you guys. So I'm going to teach you guys this particular meditation, which is essentially going to rewire the mind to be loving and kind, because in the unenlightened state, there's a certain amount of anger and bitterness and hostility, frustration, irritation, annoyance, dislike. And as long as that's in the mind, it's going to hinder you from being able to experience the peace and joy of the enlightened mental state and have fulfilling and sustaining relationships as well. So transforming the mind away from the anger, hatred, and ill will, there's loving kindness meditation to be able to help you with that. But then you need to go out into the world and be loving and kind. So I'm going to teach you guys this first, then I'm going to do it with you so that you guys get a chance to actually practice loving kindness meditation. So this is a slide that I've shown previously in this discussion, in this retreat, where I'm showing the 4 different types of meditations that the Buddha taught, with the unwholesome qualities that you're eliminating and the wholesome qualities that you're cultivating. So here with loving kindness meditation, you're eliminating anger, hatred, and ill will, and all the lesser versions. By the time you get to enlightenment, you won't even have the slightest dislike towards other people. With expectations and wants in your mind, if somebody does things the way you want, the way you expect, you'll like them. But when people don't do things the way you want and the way you expect, you'll dislike them. That dislike is actually coming from your own mind. It's not coming from the other person. Any kind of anger, sadness, frustration, all these discontent feelings like guilt, shame, fear, stress, and all these others, it's actually coming from your own mind. It's not the outside world that's producing these. And you can independently verify this through the teachings of the Buddha. So that's why he's giving you the tools to be able to liberate your mind and get free from these strong feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of this can be eliminated from the mind through eradicating the causes and conditions that are producing it. So this loving kindness meditation is going to help you to cultivate the wholesome quality of loving kindness, where you can eliminate all these strong feelings like anger, frustration, irritation, and all those lesser versions, all the way down to the slightest dislike towards others. This meditation is also helpful if you have like an inner dialogue where you're degrading and diminishing to yourself. Because oftentimes if you have ill will towards others, you will have it towards yourself too. And there'll be this inner dialogue where you'll be kind of negative and degrading within your own mind towards yourself. And you don't need to live with that. You can opt out of those kinds of things. You can actually train your mind to not do that, where you can have this love and kindness towards others. So that's what I'm going to teach you, this meditation and how to practice it. So first, what is loving kindness? It's active goodwill towards all beings without judgment. It's a genuine interest in all beings being well. In Pali, if you are around people that are using the Pali term, it's metta. You'll hear people use this. But I use all English words because it's much better to be able to learn in English, because then you can actually have a large community of people to be able to access, to be able to get help, and you'll be able to more readily be able to implement the teachings, because you don't have to learn a language first and then learn the teachings and then practice them and then get the results. You can just go right into learning and practicing the teachings, which will help you to be able to get to the results in a much better way. So loving kindness is this active goodwill, this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. And you'd like to practice this without judgment. Sometimes what people teach you is to not respect anybody until they respect you first. And if you've been taught this, where you're not going to respect other people until they respect you first, well, if everybody was practicing that, nobody would be respecting anybody, right? Because everybody would be holding back and saying, I'm not going to respect you until you respect me. Well, I'm not going to respect you until you respect me. Okay, so nobody's respecting anybody. Well, if you did that with your loving kindness, where you only practice loving kindness if you are judging other people to determine if they deserve your loving kindness, then your mind would be experiencing this conditional situation where I'm not going to be loving and kind until you're loving and kind. Well, if everybody did that, nobody would be loving and kind with anybody. So an enlightened being doesn't function that way. They don't conform to what other people are doing. You can break through this and choose to be loving and kind with everybody. And the more that you put out love and kindness, you'll see more and more this is what's coming back to you. But if you're being bitter and harsh and hostile and aggressive with people, that's what's going to come back to you. So you need to be able to get to this active goodwill towards all beings without judging others to determine whether they deserve your loving kindness, but just choosing to be loving and kind. This is true love. This is unconditional love, where people don't have to meet any condition in order for you to love them. Oftentimes what people are practicing, which they're getting confused as being love, is actually craving, desire, attachment. This is where the mind might say, I love you, therefore I want you to be with me because you make me happy. This actually isn't love. Someone might say, I love you, I've fallen in love with you. But then as time goes on, they might say, I don't love you anymore. I've fallen out of love with you. Right? You might have said this before. People might have said this to you. Well, if you understand what true love is, you actually can't fall in love and out of love with people. That's actually a conditional experience where we might call it conditional love, even though there's no such thing as conditional love. It's essentially like, if you meet these conditions, I will say I love you. But when you stop meeting those conditions, I don't love you anymore. This is actually the mind's selfishness. This is the mind's craving, desire, attachment. This is, if you do things my way, I will say I love you and I will act like I love you. But when you stop doing things my way and what I want, then I don't love you anymore. This is not actually love. This is putting wants and expectations on other people and burdening them to do things your way. What you would ultimately like to get to is where you have unconditional love, where you love all beings as they are. Understanding that you're going to disagree with people's choices and decisions, but you can still love the person. If you separate the choices and decisions from the person, then you can love all beings. You can love the person while disagreeing with their choices and decisions. Because there's only one person in the world that is going to make decisions like you 100% of the time. Do you know who that one person is that's going to make decisions your way 100% of the time? Yeah, yourself, right? So if you can only love people who do things your way, you can only love one person, right? And sometimes you might even find that hard to do, is to love yourself, right? So you would like to get to the point where you can have love and kindness, this genuine interest in all beings being well without any conditions. Right? You can separate someone's choices and decisions, understanding that people are going to make different choices than you. That's impermanence. The world is impermanent. Not everybody's going to make decisions the same way as you. So if you separate the choices and decisions people make, realizing mom, dad, brothers, sisters, life partners, children, they're going to make decisions differently than you. And that's okay. Right? And now you can love the person where you have a genuine interest in seeing them be well, while you might disagree with their choices and decisions. That way you don't need to have this anger and hostility and bitterness in your mind just because they do things differently than you. So you can get to a point where you love all beings. So this loving kindness is the antidote or the wholesome root or the remedy for this anger, hatred, and ill will. It'll completely eliminate this from your mind where you don't need to experience that anymore. You can eliminate the harshness, the bitterness, the animosity, the resentment that's in the mind. This loving kindness is part of what's referred to as the Brahma Viharas, or the 4 healthy mental states that the Buddha teaches to cultivate. In addition to all the other things that he's teaching you, there's these 4 healthy mental states that he teaches you to cultivate, and loving kindness is one of those because it antidotes or provides the remedy to something like anger, hatred, ill will, and others. This is where the Buddha sometimes gets the reputation of being like a doctor, that there are certain symptoms that are in the mind, and then he's providing a prescription. right? So if the symptom or the illness is the anger, hatred, ill will, frustration, agitation, annoyance, bitterness, hostility, dislike, well, the prescription for that is loving kindness. That's what's going to wipe all of that out. Okay? You have a question? Yeah. So in this example, we have people online. So let me just repeat your question for you. We have microphones here. If you'd like to ask a question, feel free to get a microphone here. But for those of you guys that are online, the question was, what is the disease? So in this analogy that I'm using, the disease is the anger, hatred, ill will, the frustration, agitation, annoyance. That's the symptom. That's the disease. The cause of this is what's called craving, desire, attachment. This is the mind longing, yearning, the expectation, wanting things to be a certain way. Where in the unenlightened state, if the mind gets what it wants and what it expects, it'll experience happiness, excitement, elation. This is thrill, this is euphoria, right? These are what's called conditioned feelings. Based on some condition, the mind is going to experience this happiness. But then, if those conditions aren't met, the mind experiences painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. And because you live in an impermanent world where things are constantly changing, you can't get things your way all the time. It's just not possible. So what the Buddha is teaching you is to not crave and long and yearn and chase after the objects of your affection, where the mind is craving permanence, where the mind wants things to be permanent, where you actually live in an impermanent world. So for example, if you get a brand new car and you're so proud of that brand new car and you drive it off the parking lot, if you park it at a store and you go inside and you come out and you see a scratch on your car, you might be frustrated or agitated or annoyed. This is not from the scratch. The scratch isn't causing the frustration. The person who scratched your car, they're not causing the frustration. What's causing the frustration is the mind is craving this car to be permanently beautiful, where in reality, this car can't be permanently beautiful. The paint's going to fade, the tires are going to need to be changed, the upholstery is going to get ripped and torn. This is all part of the natural world. The world is constantly changing. It's the universal truth of impermanence that things are constantly changing. But if the mind craves permanence, when it sees that scratch, it'll get angry or frustrated. But it's the mind itself that's causing that, rather than the external world. This is why you can eliminate your discontent feelings. If it was the outside world that was causing your inner feelings, you would never be able to eliminate your anger. So what the Buddha is teaching you to do is focus inwardly, train your mind, uproot the pollutions of the mind, and now you can get to complete peace and complete joy through training of the mind. You can see this too, like in a relationship. If you're with a boyfriend or girlfriend and you guys broke up, you might be sad or angry or frustrated or lonely or bored or missing this person. This is the mind craving permanence, where this relationship is not permanent. It's not your love that's causing the painful feelings. Or like if someone dies, it's not the love that's causing the painful feelings. It's the mind craving permanence, holding on to this person, wanting them to be permanent. When in reality, grandma was born, so she had to die. It's just impermanence. It's just change. So someone might get really happy when it's sunny outside, but then when it rains, they're frustrated. It's just change. That's all it is. Or if your bank account balance is up here, you might get really happy, but then when it goes down here, you might get frustrated. It's just change. That's all that's happened. But the mind is craving permanence. So that's why it's experiencing these discontent feelings. So that's the underlying teaching that the Buddha is guiding you to be able to now transform your mind to not do that, where you're not forming these conditioned feelings. Then instead of having conditional happiness and conditional sadness, pleasant and painful feelings, you can get to the point where you have unconditional happiness, where the mind's just always happy, always cheerful, always bright, always uplifted, always joyful, because it's unconditioned. There doesn't need to be any condition met to experience that. So loving kindness is part of this, where by bringing in the loving kindness, you can get rid of the anger, hostility, and bitterness, because that's where the mind becomes unskillful. When the anger, hatred, and ill will is in the mind will become unskillful. You'll tend to push people away, or you'll push a situation away, thinking that that's going to solve the problem, or you might have pushed friends or family members away. But you can see that that didn't solve the problem, because you still get angry, you still get frustrated, you still get irritated or annoyed. Or you might be bitter, harsh, and hostile through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. And now it damages the relationship. And maybe this person chooses to go away. Or you might put your pressure, your expectations. You might try to force this person to do things your way. This is the mind trying to get its cravings fulfilled. The mind has these expectations and wants, and when it's not getting what it wants, it feels painful feelings. It falsely attributes those to something external, and it thinks the way to solve this is to push this person away, or push the situation away, or be bitter, harsh, and hostile to this person, almost fearing them into doing things your way, or putting expectations on people to try to pressure or force them to do things a certain way. So as long as this anger, hatred, or will is in the mind, you can't live harmoniously with all beings, because it's only a matter of time before you have an argument, before you're frustrated, before you're yelling and hollering, before you're doing other things like this, where you can train your mind to not do that. All right. So it's loving kindness that is going to help you to be able to do that. So here's some teachings from the Buddha, just a few, where you can see that loving kindness plugs into the Eightfold Path. Because one of the things that I taught on Monday evening was the Eightfold Path. And I explained how this Eightfold Path is the core central teaching, and everything else that the Buddha taught plugs into it. And here what I'm helping you to see through the words of the Buddha is that loving kindness plugs into the Eightfold Path. And you need this meditation in order to be able to fully practice the path to enlightenment. That's what the Eightfold Path is it's the path to enlightenment. So right intention is the intention of renunciation, non-ill will, and harmlessness, or the right thinking or the right thought that the Buddha is helping you to be able to cultivate. So the second one, this intention of non-ill will, whenever you see a negative like this, a double negative in English, it's actually a positive. So non-ill will is the same as goodwill. So what the Buddha is teaching you is to cultivate the intention or the thinking or the thought of goodwill. But how could you do that if you didn't have a method to do that, or a technique to do that? So that's what the loving kindness meditation is. So I taught these others at other times. But here, if you guys remember the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, the 5th factor is to speak with a mind of loving kindness. Because when you're speaking with a mind of loving kindness, this is going to produce wholesome results in your day-to-day life. If you speak the opposite of that, if you speak with inner hate, the results are unwholesome. This is what we call unwholesome karma, or unwholesome results, that based on your decision to speak with a mind of inner hate, hostility, and bitterness, it's going to produce unwholesome results. That's going to all come back to you. People are going to choose to leave out of your life. You can independently verify what I'm sharing. Because remember, the teachings of the Buddha aren't based in belief, right? You need to be able to look in your own life and see in situations where you've spoken with inner hate, it's produced unwholesome results in your life. So as part of the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, the Buddha teaches you to essentially wrap all of your speech in this mind of loving kindness. Now, by having that goodwill in the way that you're speaking with people, now it can produce wholesome results in your relationships. Down here, this is another teaching from the Buddha where I've just kind of taken an excerpt. Prior to what I've taken out here and extracted, the Buddha was teaching his ordained practitioners. He was teaching them the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. He was explaining to them that it would be wise to speak at the proper time. What you say is true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. And then he was reminding them that people are going to speak to you in some situations at an improper time. They're going to speak to you falsehoods. They're going to speak to you harshly. They're going to speak to you unbeneficially. And they're going to speak to you with a mind of inner hate. And he says, when they're doing this, this is how to practice. He says, herein, monks, you should train thus. Our minds will remain unaffected. We shall utter no evil words. We shall reside compassionate for their welfare, with a mind of loving kindness, without inner hate. We shall reside enveloping that person with a mind filled with loving kindness. And starting with him, we shall reside enveloping the all-encompassing world with a mind filled with loving loving kindness, abundant, joyful, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. That is how you should train monks. So here he's saying that when people are talking with you, say harsh and hostile and bitter and in an unwise way, to train your mind to be unaffected by that. In the unenlightened state, you will be affected by it, because when someone's being impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful, if your mind is craving permanence, where you want everybody to speak to you in a certain way, when you're not getting what you want, you'll get angry, you'll get frustrated, you'll get agitated. It's not the other person who's causing your mind to be upset. It's your own mind craving permanence. When someone speaks to you the way you want them to speak to you, you'll be happy. But when they're not speaking to you the way you want them to speak to you, then you'll get angry or frustrated. And there's 8 billion people in the world, and you can't train all these people to do things your way. It's just not possible. But you can train your mind to be unaffected by what other people choose to do. Understanding the world is impermanent, and not everybody's going to speak to you in the way that you want them to speak to you. So the Buddha is advising you to cultivate this mind of loving kindness, where you have a genuine interest in seeing them be well. And all throughout his other teachings, he's teaching you not to form your inner feelings based on what other people are choosing to do, because you'll just continue to be angry and frustrated and irritated, because you're never going to get to a time where everybody in your life is talking to you in a certain way, because that would be permanence. But that's what the mind craves in the unenlightened state. It wants everybody to speak to you in a certain way. But then when you look at your own life, you might realize that you actually don't speak to everybody polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. So you're going to need to get to a point where you're speaking to everybody polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. And even when you do that, your mind being enlightened and experiencing peace and joy, in 99.99999% of the time, people will be loving and kind with you. But even as an enlightened being, there's going to be some situations where people are not polite, kind, friendly, respectful to you. Even during the lifetime of the Buddha, there were people that would speak to him with inner hate occasionally. But his mind was unaffected by that, because he had already trained his mind to not form his inner feelings based on what other people are choosing to do. So it's this loving kindness meditation that's going to help you to do that, where you don't have this inner hate just because somebody is being impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful. Because you can make the choice to just walk away from that conversation. Right? You don't have to stay there and argue and be frustrated in that situation. And it's loving kindness that's going to help you to be able to do that. The Buddha also talks about compassion in this particular discourse. Compassion is concern for the misfortune of others. So when someone's being bitter, harsh, and hostile, you can have concern for their misfortune. It's so unfortunate that this person thinks being bitter and harsh and hostile is somehow going to help them in their life. It's unfortunate. They haven't been exposed to these teachings, realizing all that bitterness and harshness and hostility is just going to come back to them, right? So you can just have concern for their misfortune. You can have a genuine interest in seeing them be well, but understand that they're responsible for their own wellness. You're not responsible for other people's wellness. Each person's responsible for their own wellness. Okay, here's some more teachings from the Buddha on loving kindness meditation. This is a teaching where he's actually teaching his son, Rahula. Sometimes people think the Buddha left his family and he never came back. This isn't actually true. He actually left for 6 years, but then after he trained his mind, he came back to the area where his family was, and his son actually came and ordained with him. His wife ordained with him. His mother, who was essentially a stepmother, cousins, brother-in-laws, people like this, they all came to learn with him. So here he's actually teaching his son. He says, Rahula, develop meditation on loving kindness, for when you develop meditation on loving kindness, any ill will be abandoned. This is the way a Buddha speaks. This is the way a Buddha teaches. Very clear, very concise, very precise. You don't need to interpret this. You don't need to figure out what he's trying to say. He's saying, develop loving kindness meditation, because that's what's going to eliminate ill will. And the reason why he knew this is because he did it for himself. That's what he did during those 6 years, is he first trained his own mind, experienced this enlightened mental state, which is a permanent mental state that he was experiencing throughout his entire life. And now, knowing that he had attained enlightenment, All he did was shared what he did in order to transform his mind. He shared it with other people. So he's going to speak very clear, very concise, and very precise of exactly what led to his enlightenment, so that then other people would be able to experience the same thing. Then he says, loving kindness should be developed to abandon ill will. Separate teaching, but essentially, once again, very clear, very concise, very precise. You don't have to interpret this. You don't have to figure this out. He's being very clear here. So the meditation is what's helping you to essentially fill up your gas tank. And then you go out into the world and you practice being loving and kind through your intentions, your speech, your actions. That's where the real transformation is happening. You can't meditate your way to the elimination of anger. That's just filling up your gas tank. You're going to need to go out into the world and be loving and kind in your day-to-day actions, right? So even though you can't do this, let's just say you were meditating for 23 hours a day in a remote cave somewhere. Now, when you come out an hour a day, if you're being bitter, harsh, and hostile to the people around you, you're not anywhere close to enlightenment, right? Because the mind isn't being transformed. So it doesn't matter how much meditation you do necessarily. It's all about your actions and how you function on a day-to-day basis. So the Buddha helps you to learn meditation because that's like filling up your gas tank and rewiring the mind. But the real work is when you go outside and you start interacting with your parents, your siblings, your life partner, your children, your neighbors, people that you don't even know in the public. You would like to interact with people being loving and kind through your intention, speech, and actions. And that's where the Eightfold Path is going to teach you how to do that. Then here, this is another teaching. I need to give you some background information before I share it with you, is during the lifetime of the Buddha, there were actually many teachers who were teaching. It wasn't just the Buddha. We might think that if a Buddha was alive, that everybody would want to learn from the Buddha. But when a Buddha is alive, not everybody knows that that person's a Buddha, because there's not like a certain designation that acknowledges that this person's a Buddha. A Buddha doesn't go around performing a bunch of miracles to try to convince people that they're actually a Buddha, because it's actually better if people don't know that this person's a Buddha, because one of the powers and the strengths of a Buddha is that they can observe the quality of somebody else's mind, and they can see the pollutions in that person's mind, and then they can offer them teachings to be able to help them to be able to improve the condition of their mind. So if everybody knew who a Buddha was, they would be on their best behavior when they're around that person. The Buddha wouldn't be able to see their natural mind. So the Buddha didn't go around performing a bunch of miracles to try to convince people who he was, because his teachings are independently verifiable. If you learn and practice his teachings, you can slowly see the truth for yourself that these teachings actually work. It's improving the condition of your mind and the condition of your life. So the Buddha was teaching during his lifetime, but there were several other teachers that were teaching as well. And the students that were learning with the Buddha and the students that were learning with other teachers, claiming that it was their teachings that led to enlightenment, those students would all get together sometimes and they would talk. And this is the Buddha now talking to his students about what they should do if those other students should ask them a question. So suppose they ask, meaning those other students, suppose those other students from other teachers ask you, but what, friends, is the reason unarisen anger does not arise and arisen anger is abandoned? You should answer, the liberation of mind by loving kindness. For one who attends carefully to the liberation of the mind by loving kindness, unarisen anger does not arise, and arisen anger is abandoned. This, friends, is the reason unarisen anger does not arise and arisen anger is abandoned. So let me explain to you guys what unarisen anger is. So right now, sitting here listening to me, perhaps you're not angry. You're not frustrated. You're not irritated. But if something comes along where one of your cravings, desires, attachments get triggered, your anger is going to arise. So you have anger in your mind. You have this mental object of ill will It just hasn't arisen right now. It's only a matter of time that something's going to happen in the world. Your craving, desire, attachment gets triggered, and now your anger, hatred, ill will, your frustration, your agitation, your annoyance, your dislike is going to arise. So that's the unarisen anger, this mental object called ill will that's deeply rooted in the mind that we were talking about last night. And the Buddha is saying, well, if you're not interested in this unarisen anger arising, it's loving kindness meditation that is going to ensure that that doesn't arise. But then he talks about arisen anger. Arisen anger is when your mind is actually angry. And he's saying, what is it that gets rid of this unarisen, or what gets rid of this arisen anger? Well, it's loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness in day-to-day life. So if you're in a situation where you're noticing anger is arising in your mind, what you would like to do is bring in the loving kindness. So say you're at an airport at the ticket counter and you're really angry because your flight didn't take off on time. This is, once again, your mind craving permanence, wanting every single flight to take off on time when this isn't possible because of crew issues, weather issues, maintenance issues. There's impermanence in the world, and not every flight's going to take off on time. So if you're standing at the ticket counter and you're noticing the anger getting ready to arise, and you're starting to get ready to argue with this, ticket agent, instead bring in the loving kindness. That's what's going to get rid of that arisen anger that's starting to arise in the mind, where you can now be loving and kind, because that's what's going to produce wholesome results. Standing there yelling and hollering at the ticket agent isn't going to produce any beneficial results, right? You can be loving and kind. Oh, excuse me, sir. Excuse me, ma'am. I see that my flight's delayed. Do you guys have a solution here of how I'm going to be able to get to the destination that I'm traveling to? And they're like, oh, sure, we're going to book you on this other flight. It's going to be leaving in 2 hours. You're just going to need to wait a little bit. And by the way, here's a voucher to buy something from the snack shop, and you can have a relaxing time while you're waiting for your flight. Oh, thank you so much. Right? I really appreciate your generosity. Whereas if you're yelling and hollering and arguing, okay, maybe they're going to book you on the flight because that's what they need to do, but you're probably not going to get that voucher to go have a snack in the snack bar, right? So you shouldn't be loving and kind because you want something from this person, but that is the wholesome karma that's going to be generated as a result of choosing to be loving and kind, is people are going to treat you with loving kindness because that's what you're putting out, so that's what you're going to get back. But if you're bitter and harsh and hostile with people, that's what's going to come back to you. So the Buddha is teaching you the way to ensure this unarisen anger does not arise is to practice loving kindness all throughout your day. And then this arisen anger, when you're seeing that come up in the mind, practice loving kindness. Eventually, if you practice these teachings close enough, you won't have any anger in your mind at all. It's physically impossible for an enlightened being to experience anger. Doesn't matter what happens. Even if an enlightened being's mother was murdered, they wouldn't be angry because the anger doesn't solve anything. It doesn't help you in any situation. Sometimes people hold on to their anger and their resentment, maybe like a grudge, and they think they're getting back at that other person. But this is like holding on to a hot coal, trying to burn somebody else. The only person that's getting burned is yourself. So if you're holding on to grudges or resentment or hostility towards others, it's not causing anybody harm except for you. It's just causing you harm because now that bitterness and harshness and hostility is in your mind, and it's burdening your mind and weighing you down. So this loving kindness meditation is going to liberate your mind from that, where you don't have to carry around this bitterness and harshness and hostility in the mind, the resentment. Okay, so any questions on any of this before I teach you guys how to actually do loving kindness meditation? Anything you guys would like to ask? Yes, ma'am. We have microphones here. If you could just get one and press the button, because then the people online will be able to hear you. If you speak here without a microphone, they won't be able to hear you. Mm-hmm. For those of you guys that are online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
Hello. So maybe ill will and anger inside us is a reflection of how other people treat us in some cases. because maybe not everyone deserve our love. And why can't we accept and embrace ill will because of that?
So this is the way the mind's going to think with its lack of wisdom and its unenlightened state. Is it's going to think that there's justification for this anger and think that somehow it's serving you well. But when we were born as children, we didn't have anger in our mind. We didn't have hatred in our mind. We didn't go into the nursery at the hospital hating other babies. That's not something that we have when we're born. So what we did have when we were born, though, is we had craving. We had this longing, yearning, and we had something which is called a knowing of true reality, or ignorance, or the lack of wisdom, confusion, and misunderstanding. So as soon as we came out into the world, we were discontent because our mind was craving permanence. We were inside our mother's womb, hanging out. Everything was coming in on the umbilical cord. We were all hanging out by ourselves. We didn't have anybody else to share this space with, and we were just hanging out in that environment. But when we got pushed out into the world, or surgery brought us out into the world, there was change. And right away, we started crying when we came into the world. We started being upset and crying, right? So then as we were children, we started having certain cravings. We started wanting and expecting certain things because of our mind's lack of wisdom, not understanding how unwise that is. So we went to our parents and we said, Mommy, Daddy, I want chocolate and ice cream. I want chocolate and ice cream. Right? And now Mommy and Daddy said, sure, here you go. Here's your chocolate and ice cream. Thank you so much. You're the best Mommy and Daddy ever. Right? So then the next day we might say, Mommy, Daddy, I want chocolate and ice cream. They said, here you go. Here's your chocolate and ice cream. Thank you so much. You're the best Mommy and Daddy ever. So we were getting what we wanted. So we were so happy with that. But then maybe on the third day, we said, Mommy, Daddy, I want chocolate ice cream. And they said, no. And then we're like, you're the worst Mommy and Daddy ever. The only thing that's happening here is that the mind isn't getting what it wants. It's not getting what it wants, which is this permanence. So now this anger is starting to come into the mind and is starting to form a deeply rooted container called ill will. And that ill will is being formed because the mind's not getting what it wants. So it's not because other people are treating you a certain way that anger and hostility is coming into your mind. It's because the mind isn't getting what it wants. And now when the mind's not getting what it wants, it thinks the solution to this is to be angry and bitter and harsh and hostile to other people and try to fear them into doing things our way. This is an animalistic instinct. For a lion, if another lion or another animal isn't doing things the way the lion wants, it'll growl and roar and try to fear this other animal into doing things your way. But what the path to enlightenment is about is it is about becoming a better and better human being, where you can function as a being with a higher consciousness, where you've evolved beyond these animalistic instincts, that we're not animals, we're human beings, and we can evolve to a higher consciousness where we're not walking around with anger and bitterness and hostility, and we're not judging other people thinking that, do they deserve my love or kindness? Instead, you can evolve beyond that and just be loving and kind with everybody, and understand that some people are going to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful, and other people are going to be impolite, unkind, and friendly, and disrespectful. But you can choose, based on your own decisions, to have relationships with people who are loving and kind and warm and gentle. But you can still love this person, meaning you have a genuine interest in seeing them be well. You disagree perhaps with the way that they choose to make decisions about their moral conduct, but that doesn't mean you don't have to love them. If you're only loving people when they do things your way, that's not actually love. That's craving, desire, attachment. If they do things my way, I will like them, and I will say that I love them, and I will function like I love them. But if they don't do things my way, then I will not love them, and there might be hate or anger or frustration in the mind. That's what the unenlightened mind's going to do. But what the Buddha is teaching you is to evolve past that and transform your mind to the point where your mind's not doing that any longer. Because as long as you have anger and hatred in your mind, and you're judging other people to determine whether they deserve your loving kindness or not, people are going to do exactly the same thing to you. People are going to push you aside. People are going to be bitter and harsh and hostile to you. People are going to put their expectations on you and try to control you. So you can move beyond that, where your relationships are harmonious, and you can get to the point where all your relationships are harmonious. But it needs you to be able to see the truth that holding on to anger and bitterness and hostility isn't serving you well. It's not actually helping you in any situations at all. It's actually hindering you from having loving and kind relationships with everybody around you. Is that it? Yeah? Okay. All right. So let me just check one thing here to see if we have any other questions. Okay. By the way, you're welcome to keep that in case you have more than one question, or someone around you might have a question as well. So now I'm going to share with you guys loving kindness meditation and how we do loving kindness meditation. What we do is we start with chanting in order to ease the mind into meditation. This helps you get more benefit out of the meditation itself. And it's important to understand that the chanting isn't a rite, a ritual, or a ceremony or worship. That's not what it is. During the lifetime of the Buddha, it was used purely as a learning device to be able to commit the teachings to memory. Every 2 weeks, his students would come together and they would recite his teachings orally. So when we are chanting, it's actually easing the mind into meditation and getting more benefit out of the meditation itself. Then once we're in the meditation, I'm going to be guiding you in a breathing mindfulness meditation session where you're going to be focused on the breath, and anytime the mind moves off the breath, you're cutting that off, letting it go, and bringing the mind back to the breath. This is just going to be a short little meditation at the beginning. Then we're going to move into the loving kindness meditation where you're going to hear me saying these affirmations out loud, like, may I be peaceful, may I be safe, may I be well, and may I be free of discontentedness and the suffering that it causes. You're going to repeat this within your own mind on the out breath. And in order to have loving kindness for others, you need to have loving kindness for yourself. So we start with ourself. Then we're going to go through these multiple rings. This is just a visual aid. It's not going to be these, but I'm going to go through these multiple rings. And eventually we're going to get to all beings, where may all beings be peaceful, safe, well, and free of discontentedness. And what this is essentially doing is slowly rewiring your mind to be loving and kind, right? Because when you're bitter and harsh and hostile to people and you're putting that out, that's just going to keep coming back to you. So the way that you transform your life and you transform your relationships is you need to work on your own mind first. And now when you're loving and kind, more and more, you'll see that people around you are being loving and kind. You know, I grew up with a lot of hostility in my mind because I had a lot of expectations for my mom, and I wanted my mom to be a certain way, and she was never that way. And I kept wanting to change mom, and I kept trying to change mom, and it doesn't work. Right? The way that you actually create change in your life is you need to change your own mind. And then when I changed my own mind and I started being more loving and kind with mom, that's when our relationship changed. That's where mom started to become loving and kind. Because in the past, I would be bitter and harsh and hostile with mom. I chose to no longer do that. And I needed loving kindness meditation to be able to do that. And now when I transformed my mind and I started being loving and kind with mom, mom could see that it was her mind that was being angry. And then she started working on her mind and transforming her mind. So if you're looking to get to harmonious relationships in your life, you're going to need to focus on your mind, not on other people. That's what the unenlightened mind tries to do, is go around and change everybody else, thinking that that's going to solve your problem. But that's not going to solve your problem, because the anger is within your own mind. So this meditation, you're going to see we're going to go through certain rings until we ultimately get to all beings. And I'm going to use these rings that are applying to all of us. But when you do this on your own, you're going to need to customize this for yourself. So if you have someone in your life named Bob or Susie or Barbara or Rebecca, and you have anger and hatred towards them, you're going to need to include them in your meditation when you do this on your own. So you're going to hear me say things like, may mom and dad be peaceful, safe, well, and free of discontentedness. Or may my family, friends, neighbors, and coworkers, right? Because this kind of applies to everybody. But for you, you're going to need to customize this when you do this on your own to include rings of people that you currently have anger, hatred, and ill will towards. Either they're in your life now, or even if they're in the past, and you'll never even see those people again. Maybe they're even dead. But if your mind is holding on to anger, it's just causing harm to your own mind. It's just holding on to a hot coal, right? And now you're being burned by it. So you can liberate your mind and free your mind from this anger, hatred, and ill will. So you're going to need to customize this meditation. And there might be certain times where you have people in there for a certain length of time. Like when I first started doing this, I was actually a business owner at that time. And I had certain challenges. I'd have customers or employees, or one time the landlord came into the business in front of my employees and customers and threatened to kill me, right? He was shouting at the top of his lungs, threatening to kill me, right? So he showed up in my loving kindness for a little bit. Or, if you're on your way to work and somebody cuts you off in traffic and you're noticing your anger arising, maybe that person ends up in your loving kindness meditation because you're not interested in your mind forming this anger. If you allow your mind to stay wired that way, it's going to keep doing that over and over and over and over again. So even when someone cuts you off in traffic, they can maybe show up in your loving kindness meditation for 2, 3, 4, 5 days. May that person who cut me off in traffic be well, right? That's what you would like to be able to do, is get your mind to the point where you have love and kindness for everybody around you, because it's a real burden and it's real heavy in your mind to carry around this anger and frustration. So I'm going to go through all these different rings. You're going to hear me use about 6 different rings until we get to all beings. Essentially, the way this is like a loving kindness sandwich, because after the loving kindness meditation, we're going to go back to breathing mindfulness and back to chanting. So in the middle, we've got loving kindness. The lettuce and tomato is kind of like the breathing mindfulness meditation on either side. And then the bread holding it all together is the chanting. So I'm going to guide you guys through this, and you guys are welcome to join along if you like. So the chants are over there on the cabinet. There's a laminated sheet for you guys if you guys would like to chant along. For those of you guys online, these chanting sheets are on buddhadailywisdom.com. You can click on free books and then just scroll down towards the bottom and you'll see the chanting sheet there. So you guys can take whatever position you like. The seated position, the lying position, and the standing position are ones that we use for loving kindness meditation, where the walking position isn't really used for loving kindness meditation. So I'm going to do the chanting to ease us into the meditation, and then I'll come back in with the guidance for the breathing mindfulness meditation, the loving kindness meditation, and so on. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Wat Tung Mahakawanhang Apiwateyami Sawakato Mahakawata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vichacharanang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, in the upper body erect. Just close the eyes and breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Then I'll be back with more guidance on loving kindness meditation. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Continuing to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. Repeat these affirmations in the mind on the out breath. May I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May mom and dad be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May my family, friends, neighbors, and co-workers all be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May all those who have harmed me be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May all those who I have harmed be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May all beings, wherever they reside, be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. Now return back to breathing mindfulness meditation, focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Apivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato สาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมรัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมรัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมรัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation, I'm going to share just a few things more to kind of wrap this up for you before we move on to the next topic. It's important to keep in mind that when you're doing these affirmations, you're not trying to invoke some special power to come and make mom and dad peaceful and well and all these kinds of things, or other groups of people. What you're doing is rewiring your mind so that you can be more loving and kind. So that if you're doing this on a daily basis where you're cultivating love and kindness in your mind, say for example for mom and dad, now when you're around mom and dad, your mind will have this loving kindness, and then your intention, speech, and actions can emanate from this loving kindness, where you can start being loving and kind with these beings. And now more and more, as that's what you're putting out, that's what will come back to you. As long as we hold on to expectations of how we want and expect other people to conduct themselves, then you can't break through that to just be loving and kind with the people around you. You'll have this bitterness and harshness and hostility that's coming out. So you would like to understand this meditation isn't to try to change mom and dad. That's not what this is about. It's not invoking some kind of special power to change mom and dad. It's about changing your mind so that now when you're around mom and dad, you can be more loving and kind. The Buddha gives a really good analogy about this. He talks about a digging tool, that if you have this digging tool that has a wooden handle, and each day you're digging with this tool, each day you're wearing away wood off of this handle. You're not going to know how much wood you're wearing away from the handle each day, but when the handle is completely exhausted and you need to replace the wooden handle, you're going to know that. And the Buddha teaches the same thing about eliminating all these fetters, and including anger, that each day you're not going to know how much anger you're wearing away through your loving kindness meditation and through practicing loving kindness in your day-to-day life. But when it's completely gone, you'll know that, because maybe you've been bitter and harsh and hostile with certain people in your life, and slowly but surely, each day, each week, each month, that's going to be gradually wearing away, but you're not going to know how much. By doing this meditation and by being loving and kind in your day-to-day life, you're not going to know how much of it's being worn away. But when it's completely gone, you'll know that, because it'll be 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, where you haven't been bitter and harsh and hostile with that person any longer. And that's where you'll know that it's been completely worn away. Also, the affirmations that I was using here, where I said, may all those who have harmed me be peaceful, and may all those who I've harmed be peaceful. It's important to understand that other people can't cause you to be discontent, and you can't cause them to be discontent, but you can cause other people harm, and they can cause you harm. What we mean by causing you harm is causing harm to your material possessions, to your physical body, to your reputation. People can cause harm to these kinds of things, but they can't cause you to be angry or frustrated. If someone's out there damaging your reputation, they're damaging your reputation, and now maybe they're gossiping and slandering. They're causing you harm, but they can't cause you to be angry or frustrated. If you're angry or frustrated about them causing harm to your reputation, that's because your mind is craving permanence, wanting everybody to perceive you in a certain way. And it's not possible for everyone to think of you as being loving and kind and warm and gentle. There's going to be some people who think of you as being loving and kind and warm and gentle and friendly. And there's going to be other people who hate you and despise you. But that hatred and anger is actually coming from their mind. It's not coming from you. You're not causing that person to hate you. So you can cause people harm, but you can't cause them to be discontent. And the same thing with you. People can cause you harm, but they can't cause you to be discontent. So if somebody like stole a particular thing, right, they're causing harm to you. But if you are discontent that it's gone, this is your mind craving permanence. It's not saying that this person is doing something wise, because obviously it's unwise to steal, but they're not causing you to be frustrated in that situation. Right? Your mind is craving permanence of this item, and now that you no longer have it, the mind's frustrated and agitated or annoyed. So these are just some things to keep in mind as you're learning about loving kindness, you're practicing this meditation, and you're implementing it into your day-to-day life. So do you guys have any questions on loving kindness meditation, either here at the temple or online? Anything you guys would like to ask?
Yeah, when we've been saying these affirmations in our minds, when we were doing loving kindness meditation now, I felt like a physical activity, like coming from my forehead to the back of the spine, and it was like a very pleasurable feeling, but I felt it more like a physical feeling. Mm-hmm. Is it a real thing? Because every time I do this metta meditation, I feel this kind of physical pleasure in my back.
Yeah, this is something that can happen because what you're doing is you're training your mind, which is non-physical, it's non-tangible. Then there's the brain, which is a physical organ. These two things are not the same thing. They're two separate things, but there's a connection between them. So when you're training your mind and arising this loving kindness in your mind, it can have an effect to the physical body, and you can notice these sensations. This is where the Buddha talks about permeating loving kindness in the mind, filling your mind up with loving kindness. You'll actually be doing that in your mind, the non-physical mind, but there's an effect to the brain. And even scientists are actually studying this now, because during the lifetime of the Buddha, they didn't have MRIs, CAT scans, and other devices and stuff like that, where nowadays they do. So they can actually measure this, and they can see that a person's brain is physically changing for the positive when they're training their mind through these types of teachings. So you might notice these kinds of things. When you're noticing that, yeah, it can be pleasurable, but it's important that you don't take pleasure in it, that you don't allow your mind to form conditioned pleasant feelings, because as the brain is going through these changes, they're going to be temporary. That the change itself, once it happens, is a permanent change, but the pleasurable feelings associated with the change is only temporary. So if you allow your mind to grab onto that and get conditioned pleasant feelings, then when those things aren't happening, then you'll have the painful feelings. And these changes that are going to occur, they're going to occur over a period of time, 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever. But then eventually all the changes will have occurred to the physical structures of the brain, and then you won't experience that anymore. But while the mind is in the process of being trained, it's going to produce physical sensations in the body. And now it's important to not allow the mind to have the conditioned pleasant feelings because of it. Because if you do, when those things aren't happening anymore, then the mind will experience sadness and sorrow or displeasure because it's not experiencing the pleasurable feelings any longer based on the changes that are happening. Because those changes, once they occur and they're done and over with, you're not going to experience the changes anymore because the mind has already been improved and the physical structures of the brain have been improved. And now you're just experiencing the peace and joy permanently. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is move into this next topic. It's actually a very short topic, and then we're going to take a little break. This is the 6th and 7th fetter, because in this retreat we're going through all the 10 fetters. The 6th fetter is desire for form and desire for formless. What I'm going to do is share with you guys what these are, what the symptoms are, how to eliminate it, and how to know that you've actually eliminated it. So what desire for form and formless are, we talk about these together because they're very similar. Desire for form is where the mind has a desire for existence in the form realms, the animal realm and the human realm. These are two realms that you guys are familiar with, and these realms, beings have physical form. So a human being has physical form and an animal has physical form. And the mind can have this desire, this longing, this yearning, this craving to exist in this life. Right? The mind's holding on to it, wanting it to be permanent. But then the mind can also have desire for formless, where there's a desire for existence in the realms of hell, afflicted spirits, which are like ghosts, and then the heavenly realm. These are things that can be independently verified. You might not have the wisdom right now to know that these realms are 100% the truth, but as you gain wisdom on the path, you can actually independently verify that the hell realm is actually a real realm, that there's afflicted spirits, and that there's a heavenly realm too. And oftentimes people think about these as being really far away in these far distant places, but it's actually all these beings are in the same time and space as us, that we're all here in the same time and space. Just like a human being is sitting here in this chair, if I got up and walked away, there could be a dog or a cat or a gecko or an ant or something like that that comes and is here at this particular chair. It's the same thing for hell beings, afflicted spirits, and heavenly beings, that these beings are all in the same time and space as us. And sometimes people have desire to exist in one of these realms, particularly the heavenly realm. There's being a lot of people in the world that have a longing, yearning, and desire to exist in heaven. And as long as you have these cravings to exist, your mind's going to experience discontentedness. You're not going to be able to get to complete joy and complete peacefulness as long as the mind is longing, yearning for something else. It's kind of like the grass is always greener on the other side. So if someone's in the human realm and they're having a craving, desire, attachment to be in the heavenly realm, then that means they're not content here in the human realm because they want to be somewhere else. Or if they're in the human realm and they have a desire to be in the human realm, then that means when they get close to death, their mind's going to experience a very painful death because they're holding on to this existence, not wanting it to be over. So you're not going to be able to get to permanent peace and permanent joy as long as you have desire for form and desire for formless. And while people oftentimes have a desire to exist in the heavenly realm and they think that's permanent, it's actually not permanent. You can look around the world and see everything around you is constantly changing and is impermanent. That heavenly realm is not permanent. And while oftentimes people have a desire to be in the heavenly realm, there's some people who desire to be in the hell realm too. This is a very small group of people, of course, comparative to the heavenly realm, but there are people who have a desire to exist in the realm of hell or afflicted spirits. So this is what these two pollutions are. And as long as they're in the mind, you can't experience complete peace and complete joy because the mind is holding on and wanting these things to be permanent. The symptoms of this is that the mind's going to experience conditioned feelings, either pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant. So, for example, if someone has a craving to exist in the heavenly world, maybe when they think about that, they get all excited and all happy with the idea that someday they're going to exist in heaven, right? So this is a conditioned feeling based on the condition that, oh, I'm going to go to heaven after this life. Now I'm so happy. Now I'm so excited, right? But then if they die and they realize that, hey, they're not going to heaven, now they're angry or sad or frustrated. So these conditioned feelings are going to be in the mind whenever there's craving, desire, attachment for anything. Also, an individual can experience fear of death or even wanting to die. Maybe they want to die and go to heaven, or they want to die and go to hell, or they want to die and come back to the animal realm. This can also be in the mind as well. And this fear of death is, if the mind's holding on to this existence, not wanting to die, now there can be this fear of death. Or maybe someone fears going to the hell realm, and now they're holding on to this life and they don't want to let go of this life because they're afraid of what's going to come next. So these are things that these particular fetters or pollutions will produce, is that there's this fear. And then there can be pleasant thoughts of an afterlife or a new life in another realm. The solutions for this, just like all other cravings, desires, attachments that are in the mind, is to eliminate those through practicing the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the complete perfect plan that the Buddha shares that's going to help you to gradually train your mind along this path to be able to eliminate this longing, yearning, this unquenchable thirst, thinking that the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some lasting satisfaction, where the mind chases and chases and chases and chases and chases. Oftentimes people can see that fairly clear, and then if the mind's not doing that, the mind typically swings all the way over here to the other side, where it's dull and lethargic, maybe lazy or complacent. This is where the unenlightened mind typically lives, either in this chase, or this exhaustion and tiredness, this complacency, this dullness, this sluggishness. But what the Buddha is teaching you to do is come to the middle, where there's a middle way, where you can pursue things with ambition and enthusiasm and motivation, but without chasing and forming your inner feelings, and without being complacent or lazy or lethargic. So the Eightfold Path is going to guide you in fine-tuning the mind to come to the middle and to be able to pursue things as a goal, objective, or interest. The things that are really targeting your craving, desire, attachment is the breathing mindfulness meditation and the generosity. These are training your mind to let go, let go, let go, because that's what the mind's doing with craving, desire, attachment, is it's holding on. So when you're practicing breathing mindfulness meditation and your mind moves off the breath, it's letting go. Letting go. And your mind is like being exercised through the breathing mindfulness meditation over a consistent long-term period to let go. And the same thing with generosity, where you're giving and sharing with others without any expectation of anything in return, such as your time, effort, energy, and resources. Because when the mind has craving, desire, attachment, it'll tend to be selfish. It'll hold on to things very tightly. It won't be interested in sharing with other people. So when you give and share with other people, you'll be able to train your mind to let go and not hold on to things so tightly. So that's why the Buddha teaches generosity. In addition to these, the way that help you eliminate desire for form and desire for formless and overcome the fear of death is to do what's called reflection on death, or contemplation of death. This is where you sit quietly and you close your eyes, and maybe for 10, 15, 20 minutes, you envision that this being has died. Maybe you were in a car accident. Maybe you had a terminal illness, any number of different things, right? You can envision that in your mind and play that out in your mind. You're not aspiring to die. You're not wanting to die, but you're just kind of convincing your mind that you have died. Maybe you play that out. Maybe there's a police officer or a doctor or nurse that informs your family. And now you see, how does your family react? Again, you're not planning this out. You're just kind of convincing your mind that you've died, almost like you're a fly on the wall at your own funeral, overlooking this. And you're convincing your mind that you've died. And you might actually grieve during this process of the 10, 15, 20 minutes that you're actually doing this. And maybe even afterwards, you might notice some sorrow and grief in your mind. That's because your mind is holding on to this life, wanting it to be permanent. And now when you're confronting this death that's going to occur, this impermanence, your mind doesn't like it. And it might grieve, and you might even cry during this period of time. That's part of your mind letting go. Because death is going to come visit every single one of us. None of us are going to live forever. So death is kind of like waiting over there in the corner, and it's going to come visit you at some point. And you can let it come and sneak up on you and catch you by surprise, cut you off at the knees and pull the carpet off from under your feet. Or what you can do with reflection on death is you can say, hey, death, I see you over there. I know you're going to come visit me, so I'm going to come visit you. Right? I'm going to come visit you. I'm going to get familiar with you, and I'm going to get comfortable with you, because I'm going to face this death at some point Might as well face it now, and now you can get comfortable with it. And after you get comfortable with your own death, you might need to do this 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different times. Eventually you get to the point where you can do this reflection on death, and you'll be completely comfortable with it. And then when you actually get to the time of death, however many years from now, you've already confronted it. You understand it's going to happen. You're completely comfortable with it. But if you don't confront death, then when you actually get to it, it'll be very painful for you. And you might even have fear of it. But you can actually confront it now, so then you can live the rest of your life without that fear of death. Because by the time you eliminate this desire for form and desire for formless, you won't have any fear of death whatsoever. And you can train your mind to get to that point, and reflection on death is one of the ways to do this. You can also do this not only for yourself related to this particular fetters, but if you have the fear of other people's death, like maybe your parents or your life partner or your children, or maybe you even have an animal or something like this that is a pet. If you know that you're going to have a mind that's shaken up during those people's deaths, that's because the mind's holding on, wanting them to be permanent. So you can do this reflection on death with them in mind too, like your mom or your dad or brothers or sisters or life partner and people like this. You can sit and envision that they have died, play that out in your mind, convince your mind that they have died, and now you're confronting that death, so that when it actually gets to that point, you'll be completely comfortable with it. You don't have to be sorrowful and grieving when somebody dies, because this is just a normal thing that occurs, that because people are born, they're going to die. It's just the way life happens. And if we don't confront that, and if our mind isn't prepared for it, it'll be really painful when it happens. And you don't have to experience that. Your mind can be quite peaceful and joyful when somebody dies. You're not joyful because they died. You're joyful despite the fact that they died. And now you can just have this appreciation and gratitude that this person was in your life, rather than having this sorrow and grief and sadness and frustration that is often is in the mind. Then, if you're doing these kinds of things like the Eightfold Path, breathing mindfulness, meditation, generosity, reflecting on death, then you're going to need to be able to restrain the mind with right mindfulness and right effort from the Eightfold Path. That whenever you have these thoughts of existing in the world, you need to cut it off and let it go. So if you're like looking at this beautiful bird flying in the sky and it's like, wow, it's so beautiful. I wish I was a bird. Cut that off, right? That's your mind longing and yearning, wanting to be an animal, right? So you're going to need to cut that off and see that in your mind. Or if you're longing and yearning to exist in this life, in this human life, and you're noticing that coming up in your mind, you're going to need to cut that off, not allow your mind to continue to think that way. Okay? So the way that you're going to know that this has been eliminated is that there won't be any fear of death. There will be no fear of death in the mind whatsoever. But also, there will not be a desire to die either. The Buddha calls this craving for existence and craving for non-existence. If you have craving for existence or you have craving for non-existence, then that means you're not content in the present moment. You're not peaceful in the present moment because you're craving to exist or you're craving to not exist. You're not peaceful and joyful in the present moment. So by the time you eliminate these two, you won't have either one of those, either a fear of death or a desire to die. The mind will be completely peaceful and joyful in the present moment without longing, yearning for another life, nor an afterlife. Right? Sometimes people are taught to long and yearn for this afterlife. That's not the teachings of the Buddha. It's not a bunch of beliefs that you're hoping something good happens when you die. Instead, you're creating a wonderful life now in your current life, and you're gradually making your way to that. Right? So there's no interest of existence in any of these realms whatsoever. The mind will not be worried nor have fear and anxiety about what is next after this life, if anything at all. Because for an individual whose mind is unenlightened, at the time of death, there's going to be rebirth. And you can independently verify this. Again, you might not have the wisdom of how to do that right now, but you can gain that wisdom if you'd like to be able to understand how to independently verify this cycle of rebirth. So for someone who's unenlightened, they're going to experience this rebirth. But for someone who's enlightened, if they die, the Buddha leaves this as an undeclared teaching. He doesn't say what comes next. He intentionally does this. He describes it as an undeclared teaching because let's just say there is something next, and let's just say it's really wonderful, and let's just say he describes what that is. Well, you're going to be kind of stuck in this infinite loop because in the unenlightened state, you're trying to get to enlightenment, and maybe you're trying to get to that afterlife that is so wonderful. Well, you can't get to enlightenment because you're craving this afterlife. You can't get to this enlightened mental state because the mind's still craving and longing, yearning for what comes next, right? And maybe there is nothing next. The Buddha just didn't declare it. He didn't say what is or isn't next. So you need to get to the point where you're completely peaceful and joyful in the present moment. And by the time you get to enlightenment, you're not going to care what's next because your mind's completely peaceful and joyful in the present moment, that if there's something next, okay, great, fine. And if there isn't anything next, okay, that's fine too. If there is something next, it's either as good as what you're currently experiencing or better. This enlightened mental state, you'll know that you're experiencing it because it'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Your mind's completely peaceful and completely joyful. And it's not about what's coming next. It's about getting to that mental state now in this life. And you'll be able to see your mind gradually making your way to it. Okay? So you won't have this worry or anxiety about what's next, if anything at all. So do you guys have any questions on this desire for form or desire for formless? Gala, you have a question? Okay. Remember, for those of you online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
I wonder if this feather can be eliminated before the first one, or if there's an order.
Yeah, the Buddha puts them in an order because in general, they need to be eliminated generally in this order, but you're working on all of these simultaneously. You're not like waiting for one to be eliminated before you eliminate the others, but they are in this order for a reason. Because, for example, like you learned about personal existence view, right? If you still had that, you wouldn't be able to get rid of these, because you still think there's a you here, right? So you need to get rid of personal existence view first before these will actually eliminate. Same thing with like sensual desire. If you still have sensual desire in your mind, you can't eliminate these two because your mind's still holding on to the material objects around you, wanting those to be permanent. So you can't get rid of these two if you still have sensual desire. So he's putting them in this order for a reason, because this is like a personal growth plan of how the mind needs to kind of untangle itself, because the mind's kind of all tangled up in this unenlightened state, and you're kind of detangling it, and it needs to happen in this particular order. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I don't see any questions online or here. Oh, you have a question? Yes, sir. Yep.
During the meditation, you mentioned cutting off the thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember from my previous practice many, many years ago that the teacher taught me to not cut off the thought. You mentioned don't observe it, don't interact with it. I was taught not to interact with it, but not to like actively try and cut it off. And what do you think? Why do you think there's a difference in approach?
Sure. What happens is a lot of people are out there teaching without basing their teachings on the original teachings of the Buddha. If you look at the original teachings of the Buddha, which I'll show you here, he explains to cut off the thought. And the reason why is because in day-to-day life, when you're noticing the anger arising, you need to cut that off. If you allow the mind to form the feeling, then it's going to just stay wired that way, and it's going to continue to do that. So what you need to be able to do is build the awareness of the bodily sensations that are happening before the feeling occurs. There's this early warning system that you have. And when you're aware of those bodily sensations, you can actually cut it off before it actually becomes a feeling. You're not suppressing your feelings or repressing them. You're actually cutting it off before it becomes a feeling. It's kind of like if you were in a boat going from Canada to the UK, you'd like to prevent the water from ever coming into the boat. Because once the water gets in, you've got a real problem to deal with now. So oftentimes people are out there not teaching based on the original words of the Buddha. So they're teaching all these things that are just misunderstandings, that they've been passed down from person to person to person. So I'll show you the original words of the Buddha, where he explains in the meditation is to cut off your thoughts. Let me get back to that point. This was earlier. Oh, there it is. Okay. So this is where the Buddha is introducing the 4 types of meditation that he teaches. And there's another book over there that has the detailed guidance from the Buddha in his original words of how he's explaining to you to actually meditate. But this is where he's just introducing it. But if you'd like to see more detail, I have more detail from the original words of the Buddha. Here you can see with mindfulness of breathing, or breathing mindfulness meditation, should be developed to cut off thoughts. And you can look in the original teachings of the Buddha to be able to see that that's the case. And then you'll see that this actually works, right? So if you talk to that person who's not cutting off their thoughts and you ask them, do you still experience anger, frustration, agitation, annoyance? They'll say yes, because you can't get to the elimination of discontentedness without cutting off and letting go. You need that in the meditation, but you also need it outside the meditation, because you're building this internal mechanism in your mind to be able to cut off and let go. And that's essentially what's going to rewire your mind, so where it no longer experiences any discontent feelings. So this is the original words of the Buddha on that. Okay. And by the way, because of impermanence, the same thing that the Buddha taught, the universal truth of impermanence, different people are going to teach different things. But when you base your teachings on the original words of the Buddha, then you'll practice those, then you know exactly what it takes to be able to get the mind to this point. All right, so let's get to our break. I'm going to take a break. It's basically 10 minutes to 11. What I'm going to do when we come back from break is I'm going to teach this fetter of conceit. This is part of the ego in the mind. There's 2 aspects of the mind that are forming the ego. The Buddha didn't have the word ego during his lifetime to use, so we use the word ego today, but the Buddha referred to this in 2 different ways. So I'm going to explain to you guys part of that through this fetter of conceit. I'll explain to you what it is, the symptoms of it, how to eliminate it, how to know that you've eliminated it, because this will hinder you from having wonderful relationships with people. This will hinder you from learning and actually being able to develop on the path. It's going to hinder you in all kinds of ways. So I'll explain to you guys what that is. So let's take a 20-minute break. Actually, let's take a 25-minute break. Just make it even. We'll come back at 11:15. That'll actually be a lot easier for everyone. Okay, so perhaps I'll see you guys after break. Oh, Pam, I just saw your question. I'll go ahead and answer you here. Let me first shut off the live stream.